Hello and welcome to my channel where we talk about books, and today's book is Incidents of Travel in the Yucatan by Stephens and Catherwood. Catherwood being the illustrator. Well, where to begin? Well, you all know where the Yucatan is. It's that eastern peninsula of Mexico, down there before you actually slip out of Mexico, off to the east, and it's full of ruins, and that's what got Stephens and Catherwood out there. They were there ruin hunting. Which I'm sure is much more exciting than castle hunting in Germany, which is what I did. Yes. So, the book has a tone of accepting these people for what they are. Kind of. And it has to be admitted, they did include a historical section in which he detailed the troubles the Spaniards had when they embarked upon conquest. It wasn't all, Sunday lunches. A great many perforations going on, and not all on the Indian side and not all on the Spanish side, so anyway, it ended up what it is, and that is conquered by Spain. So, in the 1800s, Stephens gathered up Catherwood, and off they went. They did have a traveling companion with them, but we don't get to hear from him very much. What we do find is that he had some contacts who arranged with other Spaniards across the country to put them up for a night here and there and hither and yon. So they went traveling about from one spot to another. There is, I have to admit, some racism in the attitude of the Americanos. The Spanish, of course, yes, undoubtedly, they had their own brand of racism. But the Americans were constantly pointing out when they found a superior specimen of Indian, detailing the difference between mestizos and the Spanish and the Indians and the other half-castes that you came up with, the various situations he found himself in were somewhat distressing. It seems they felt the need to take samples and specimens, which, as we all know, does eventually lead to furthering the destruction. But he wanted some evidence other than just merely photographs, because he did have photography equipment of the kind known as daguerreotype. And he did have illustrations done by Mr. Catherwood. Incidentally, it was this book that made Frank Lloyd Wright build the houses he did build in Los Angeles. So there is a interest in this book from those interested in Frank Lloyd Wright and his Californian architecture. Vastly different from his prairie work. But you have to read this book. You do. For some reason, somehow, one has to read this book. You keep coming back to it. You forget what time of day it is and how long you've been reading it. It is a massive book. They go into the Mayan calendar, how they tell dates, hieroglyphs. They talk about the horrific beasts and the decorations. And how a shame, such a shame that these things were being eaten alive. These ruins were being eaten alive by the vegetation. Even though it's a dry season, apparently the vegetation just runs rampant. But you get a glimpse of how an utterly barren and distressed the native people were under their Spanish masters. So you meet all kinds of people, riffraff of this sort or another, how people entertained themselves, sometimes brutal, sometimes kindly. It's a remarkable book. I can understand easily why it became a bestseller. Not only the fantastic alien separation that we have from such an alien culture as the Mayan. Not many people, of course, today know how brutal that culture was. But he tells a very good story. There was a great deal of sickness, a great deal of trouble, a great deal of misunderstanding. It was just one heck of a trip. They had, there's a problem with water, there's a problem with horses, there's problems here, there, and otherwise. Can they trust people? Now, this was his second trip. So he wasn't a neophyte here. This was his second trip into the area. They had just done a cursory inspection run through on the first trip. And this time they were focusing strictly on the Yucatan and trying to find every single Mayan ruin they could. You have pictures, you get drawings of facades, you get floor plans, you get general views of maps. There's a house, there's a building, there's the woods, there's a path, and so on. So it was quite something. Now, some of the Mayan ruins had been burglarized, dare we say, where the stones were deliberately carted off to build cathedrals and Indian housing, and what the people did to get water. My God. It was so torturous and so difficult and just so deadly that the Indians would not let the women go to the well. Now, these wells were 350 feet beneath the ground. They were subterranean. And you sometimes had to crawl on your hands and knees. You had to take these big bundles of woven straw and caked mud and so forth to go down there and get the water. And then you had to put a strap across your forehead and drag it back out. Whether you had to crawl on your hands and knees, climb ladders, and all the rest of this stuff. Jeez. All this work just to get water. But without it, what are you going to do? There's not much you can do except build cisterns and hope for the rains to come. Which they may or may not do. So, they're kind of SOL. So, it is a very exciting book, and I enjoyed reading it. And if you're at all interested in travel and seeing the world, even if through other people's eyes, you can make up your own mind about that. But it was a good book and a lot of fun to read. I think you'll enjoy it. Thank you for coming. I hope you enjoyed this video. And please feel free to come again.